The wind never stops here. It rolls endlessly across the Mongolian steppe, combing through the grass like a patient hand, whispering through the bones of forgotten yurts, rattling the skulls of horses long gone. To live here is to hear that voice from birth to death, the constant breath of a land so vast and so pitiless that it erases all but the strongest. In this landscape, there are no cities, no walls, no marble temples. There is only movement, horizon, and the rhythm of survival. The steppe is not empty, though it looks it, beneath the endless sky. Small encampments. The plains, moving with the seasons. Smoke curls from felt tents, and herds of sheep, goats, and horses graze in quiet obedience. These are the people of the wind nomads who follow grass, rain, and instinct. They measure wealth not in gold, but in animals, and they fight for pasture as fiercely as others might fight for thrones. Life here is both simple and brutal. Food depends on weather. Weather depends on gods. And gods are unpredictable. The clans, Borgigin, Teyesiet, Merkit, Tatars. Feud over honor and revenge. Blood feuds last generations. Every man carries a bow. Every woman knows how to pack a yurt before dawn. The strongest rule, but even the strongest can fall overnight. Survival depends on the tribe, and yet every tribe is its own world. Unity, in such a place, is a dream as fragile as frost. Two outsiders. This land seems backward, but the steppe breeds something that soft lands cannot: endurance, adaptability, and a memory as long as the wind. Here, a man learns to read the clouds better than any scholar reads books. He can judge distance by the gallop of a horse and direction by the taste of the dust. He learns that mercy is rare and weakness fatal. It is in this crucible that the world's most improbable empire will be born. From these plains, from this silence, this hunger, this ruthless equality, will come a man who believes the entire earth can be ruled as one herd. Before him, empires rise and fall like passing caravans. After him, even the continents will not look the same. But for now, it is still just the steppe. The sky stretches unbroken. The herds move. Children chase colts through the grass while old men whisper to spirits in the smoke. Somewhere, perhaps, a shaman mutters that a storm is coming, not of rain, but of men. The geography itself teaches conquest. The endless horizon dulls the fear of distance. There are no walls to teach the mind to stop. The horse becomes an extension of the body, the bow an extension of the will. And once the people of the steppe begin to move together, nothing in the settled world will be able to stand still. It is hard to imagine that this barren land, a place where frost can bite in August and drought can starve a family by October, will soon produce armies that will sweep through cities of marble and silk. But the steppe knows transformation. The same winds that freeze can also carry the smell of victory. Historians still wonder how such a sparse world produced such boundless ambition. Was it desperation, born from endless hunger and cold? Was it the isolation, a culture with no neighbor strong enough to humble it? Or was it something more primal, a conviction, buried in the marrow of the steppe, that the world beyond the horizon was merely an extension of home? In a few short decades, the quiet herders will become horsemen feared from China to the Danube. The yurts will multiply into mobile cities. The fires that once cooked milk will light the siege of empires, and the world, for better or worse, will learn to pronounce a new name. For now, the wind keeps its secrets, but somewhere among the tents of the Borgigin clan, a child is born. His name is Temujin. The steppe stirs. Temujin comes into the world in the year 1162, wrapped in the felt of a nomad tent and in the expectations of his clan. He is born clutching a blood clot in his hand. A sign, his mother says, that he is destined to rule. It is a good omen, but also a dangerous one. On Tistepi, destiny is a thing that others envy and fear. His father, Yasuge, is a chieftain of the Borgigin, a minor branch of the larger Mongol tribes. His mother, Hchelin, is a woman of sharp mind and stronger will. stolen from another clan and made wife by abduction, a common, if brutal, form of courtship on the steppe. Their camp stands near the Anan River, where the grass rolls like an ocean, and every path leads to both opportunity and betrayal. From as early as years, Temujin learns what it means to be born into chaos. The Mongol world is a patchwork of shifting loyalties and blood debts. One season, a neighboring tribe is ally. The next, an enemy. Children learn to ride before they can walk, to string a bow before they can count. Survival begins at birth. Yasuge is a man of ambition, respected, feared, but not yet powerful. He dreams of uniting the tribes under his banner. To that end, he arranges a betrothal for young Temujin to a girl named Bert from the Anjarat tribe, sealing the alliance with fermented mare's milk and promises of peace. Temujin is only 9 years old, but already he's being traded like a chess piece in the politics of survival. On his return from the Anjarat camp, Yasuge is poisoned by enemies pretending to offer him hospitality. He dies before his people can save him, leaving Temujin fatherless in a world that devours the weak. The family's followers scatter. No one serves a dead man's heir. Ellen and her children are cast out, abandoned to starve. It is here that Temujin's legend truly begins, not in victory, but in hunger. His mother teaches her children to dig for roots, to catch fish with their bare hands, to steal what they must. The wind howls through their tent at night, and the boy listens to it like a voice. He learns silence, patience, and the art of remembering grudges. When his half-brother better hoards food, Temujin kills him, a crime that would stain any other man. But on the steppe, it marks him as decisive. The world of the steppe is merciless. Hesitation kills faster than hunger. From that moment, he is both feared and obeyed by his siblings. There are brief moments of beauty amid the struggle. Temujin rides across the plains with his brothers, their horses moving like one creature under the vast blue sky. He learns to respect the animals more than men. Horses do not lie, says. They do not betray. That lesson will stay with him long after he wears the title of Khan. As he grows, Temujin learns the old Mongol ways, the laws of herding, the omens of the shaman, the codes of revenge, but he also sees their weakness. The tribes waste their strength fighting one another. Raids, kidnappings, revenge killings. It is a circle with no end. The boy who has known betrayal begins to wonder, what if all these warring clans could be made to obey one law, one vision? Captured once by the Taishiad, rivals of his father's line, Temujin is enslaved, forced to wear a wooden kang around his neck. He escapes with the help of a sympathetic guard, a moment that teaches him something vital. Loyalty can be won not by fear, but by trust. He will never forget the man's mercy. Years later, he will reward him beyond imagining. By his late teens, Temujin is already gathering followers, men who see in him not just courage, but purpose. He has no noble army, no fortress, no city. Only conviction. The world does not yet know it, but the boy who grew up hungry by the Anan River is about to reorder history. He will meet his childhood friend Jamuka again, a man destined to become both his ally and his rival. He will find Bert, his betrothed, and together they will rise from exile to rule the plains. But before the rise, there must be struggle. Before the empire, there must be vengeance. Historians still debate whether his vision was born from ambition or trauma, whether he sought unity for the good of his people or to ensure he would never again be powerless. Perhaps it was both. Onti Steppe, power and survival are the same word, spoken in different tones. For now, he is still just Temujin, a boy who has lost everything, but refuses to kneel. The steppe watches. The wind shifts. Somewhere in the distance, horses begin to gather. Before he becomes a conqueror, Temujin must first learn to command loyalty, not the kind inherited by birthright, but the kind earned one man at a time, through trust and necessity. On this steppe, power is a fragile thing, bound together by oaths that can dissolve as quickly as morning frost. And yet, this is where Temujin begins to shape a new order. He is still young when he finds Jamuka again, his Anda, his sworn brother, a man of equal spirit and cunning. Their friendship is sealed in the old way. A shared drink of milk, a clasp of hands, and a promise that they will remain as one body, one soul. Together, they gather other outcasts and warriors, those with little to lose and everything to gain. Among them are men like Gelm and Gib, names that will one day echo through empires. Gelm is said to have once sucked poison from Temujin's wound after battle, saving his life. Gib, whose name means arrow, earns his place by shooting Temujin in combat, and when captured, offers his service instead of his life. Temujin spares him. In this single act, a pattern emerges. Mercy where others expect vengeance, loyalty born not from fear but respect. While Jamuka dreams of restoring the old ways of tribal dominance, Temujin dreams of breaking them. He believes that men should be elevated for merit, not for lineage. It is an idea as radical as fire in dry grass. To the old chieftains, he is dangerous. To the poor and the orphaned, he is hope. The bonds Temujin forges are practical, not sentimental. In an age when every man can be both ally and rival, he treats loyalty as a form of currency. He rewards it swiftly and punishes betrayal with terrifying efficiency. When he shares food with his men, it is a signal I am one of you. When he divides spoils evenly, it is a revolution. But revolutions, even quiet ones, rarely go unchallenged. Jamuka, once his closest ally, begins to resent Temujin's rise. Old friendships curdle under the weight of ambition. The two men, once blood brothers, now represent two visions of the steppe, one bound by tradition, the other by transformation. Their split becomes legend. Jamuka declares himself Gurchan universal ruler, in the old Mongol style, surrounding himself with noble clans who cling to ancestry as armor. Temujin, in contrast, gathers the low-born, the overlooked, the pragmatic. His camp grows not by inheritance, but by invitation. Where Jamuka promises honor, Temujin promises victory. The first true test of their bond comes in fire. Jamuka raids Temujin's followers, burning their tents, scattering their herds, and boiling his enemies alive, a message written in cruelty. Temujin does not answer in rage, but in organization. He studies his enemies' methods, notes their weaknesses, and begins to impose discipline on chaos. The tribes have always fought like storms, sudden, loud, and fleeting. Temujin teaches them to fight like a tide, steady, inevitable, consuming everything in its path. This is where his genius begins to show. He restructures the army into units of 10, 100, and 1,000. Arban, Jagan. Each group is loyal not to a family but to the Khan himself. It is a system that will later allow his armies to stretch across continents without losing coherence. Around the campfires, the men begin to whisper. They say, Temujin is protected by heaven. They say the spirits of his ancestors ride with him. Whether they believe it or not hardly matters. The belief itself becomes power. When the two armies finally meet, it is not merely a battle for land, but for the soul of the steppe. Jamuka fights with pride. Temujin fights with purpose. The result is inevitable. Temujin wins. Jamuka is captured by his own followers and delivered, bound to his former brother. Here, history pauses to take note of a remarkable act. Temujin does not torture Jamuka. Instead, he allows him to choose his own death. A final mercy between men who once swore to die together. Jamuka asks for a noble execution, one that sheds no blood. Temujin grants it. The old world ends quietly. After that day, no one doubts who will rule the steppe. But Temujin has learned something deeper than victory. That loyalty, once broken, can never be repaired. And that unity must be built, not on friendship, but on order. Around him, the clans begin to fall in line. Men who once swore by ancestral spirits now swear by his banner. The sold his personal standard, rises a spear topped with 9 white horse tails. Shimmering against the blue sky, it becomes the symbol of something new. The idea that all Mongols, no matter their tribe, can belong to one destiny. Historians still debate whether Temujin's rise was driven by genuine vision or relentless self. Perhaps it does not matter. What matters is that for the first time, the tribes of the steppe began to think not as scattered herds, but as a single people moving under one sky. In the distance, smoke rises from conquered camps. The horses grazed peacefully. The wind carries a name that has not yet been spoken aloud, a name the world will soon learn to fear and admire in equal measure. Genghis. By the time Temujin stands at the head of his army, the steppe is no longer a patchwork of warring clans. It is a single simmering field of power waiting for someone bold enough to seize it. The age of petty raids and ancient feuds is dying, though most do not realize it yet. The old chiefs still cling to their honor like a saddle too worn to ride. Temujin, however, sees the future, and it will not wait. His army, once a ragged band of loyal followers, now moves like one organism. Each rider knows his place. Each archer knows his signal. The old tribal lines blur for the first time in memory. A warrior from the Merkit fights beside a man from the Taichi Ode without drawing his sword at night. Loyalty is no longer to blood, but to the man who commands it. Temujin. The transformation does not happen in a single battle or speech. It happens in 1,000 small decisions. Each punishment, each reward, each act of justice. Temujin makes laws, where before there was only tradition. He forbids the kidnapping of wives, outlaws, theft of livestock, and punishes betrayal without mercy. The strength of a wall, he says, is not in its stones, but in the loyalty of those who build it. When he takes captives, he does not enslave them. He absorbs them. A defeated enemy who swears loyalty may live to fight again under his banner. This policy is both terrifying and magnetic. Whole clans surrender, knowing that under Temujin, their lives may be spared, and perhaps even improved. The Mongols begin to multiply, not by birth, but by allegiance. To ensure that old alliances cannot fracture his new order, Temujin reorganizes society itself. He divides the tribes into units that cut across lineage. 10 households form an arben, 10 arben make a jagan, 10 jagan form a ming. Leadership is earned, not inherited. Merit replaces pedigree. For the first time in steppe history, a poor herder can rise to command 1,000 men if he proves his worth. The effect is electric. Men who have spent their lives bound by clans suddenly glimpse something greater than family, a nation. The idea is new, intoxicating, and frightening. It means that the world can be rebuilt, not by ancestry, but by ambition. But not everyone accepts this. The old tribal lords, especially the Tatars, Naimans and curates, see Temujin's system as blasphemy. To them, the world has always been governed by heritage. Who is this man, this upstart with no royal blood, to rewrite the code of generations? They conspire, forming alliances of desperation. Temujin answers not with negotiation, but with speed. His cavalry strikes like a thunderclap. The Tatars, the ancient enemies of his clan, are annihilated. When captured, their chiefs are executed to the 3rd generation. A punishment meant not for cruelty, but for memory. The message is clear. The old world is over. With each victory, his legend grows. Shamans begin to whisper that the eternal blue sky itself has chosen him. Dekalim, the one who brings order. His enemies call him the one who brings ruin. Both are correct. The unification of the tribes is not only political, it is psychological. The Mongols begin to see themselves not as scattered clans, but as a chosen people, united under heaven's will. They adopt a new law code, the Yasa, an evolving set of decrees that governs everything from warfare to marriage to the treatment of animals. To break the Yasa is to defy the Khan, and by extension, heaven. Temujin enforces these laws with both fairness and ferocity. When a soldier steals a horse, he is executed. When a commander disobeys orders, his entire unit is punished. But when a poor man speaks truth to power, Temujin listens. Justice becomes his greatest weapon, one that cuts deeper than the sword. He also understands symbols. His banner, the Soldnau, carries 9 white horsetails, representing the 9 tribes united under his command. Each morning it flutters in the wind like a silent prayer, visible for miles. It is more than decoration. It is declaration. The world will learn to follow it, or fall before it. At last, in 1206, after years of conquest and negotiation, the chiefs of the steppe gather by the Anon River. The air is heavy with smoke and prophecy. They crown him Genghis Khan. Universal ruler, the word carries weight beyond translation. In that momentum, Yushin ceases to be a man of the steppe and becomes something larger, the instrument of destiny. Around him, the newly unified Mongols celebrate, their horses adorned with silver, their bows strung and ready. It is a strange kind of peace, one that hums with the promise of motion. For the first time in recorded history, the Mongol tribes are one, and already, their gaze drifts beyond the horizon. Historians still wonder how Temujin achieved what no one before him had managed. Was it pure genius, or the accidental alignment of chaos and opportunity? Perhaps it was both. The steppe had been waiting for a leader ruthless enough to break it and wise enough to bind it again. Under the eternal sky, the drums of war begin to echo once more. Not for the steppe, but for the world beyond. The year is 1206. The spring wind blows over the Anon River, carrying the scent of smoke, sweat, and horsehide. Thousands of gathered chieftains, warriors, shamans, and families from every corner of the steppe. The air hums with tension and awe. For decades, these same tribes have spilled one another's blood. Now, for the first time in memory, they kneel together before one man. Temujin steps forward, wrapped in sable, the sun glinting off his iron helmet. His face is calm, not proud, not gentle, but carved with the same patience as the land that made him. A shaman raises his hands to the sky and declares that the eternal blue heaven has blessed this man with the right to rule all peoples under it. The crowd murmurs a single word over and over, until it becomes chant, then thunder. Genghis. The meaning of the title is debated even today. Some say it means oceanic, for his power that will flow without end. Others say it means mighty or universal. Whatever its origin, the name transforms him. Temujin dies in that moment, and Genghis Khan is born. The coronation is no mere ritual. It is the birth of a new political system, a new worldview. Gone is the notion of tribe as destiny. In its place stands a structure held together by law, discipline, and loyalty to the Khan. The new ruler divides his people, not by blood, but by purpose. Every man, no matter his birth, has a place in the Great Order. He proclaims a vision that seems unthinkable to his audience, that the Mongols are not meant to remain herders scraping by on the steppe, but to rule as heaven's will commands over all nations. The idea lands like a spark in dry grass. The men cheer. The shamans whisper prophecies, and the horses stamp as if impatient to begin. Still, Genghis Khan is not a man of speeches. His genius lies not in words but in systems. He codifies his yasa, the supreme law of the empire, a living code that governs the behavior of his people, from the treatment of prisoners to the conduct of war. It forbids theft, adultery, and the enslavement of fellow Mongols. It demands loyalty to the Khan and mercy for those who surrender. It elevates order above passion, a rare virtue on a landscape driven by revenge. To enforce it, Genghis establishes messengers and judges, men chosen not for nobility but for competence. He builds a postal system, the Amma relay of stations and riders that will one day stretch across continents, allowing messages to travel faster than any kingdom before him. For a people once defined by chaos, this is civilization, mobile and precise. But the coronation also changes him. Genghis now carries not just ambition, but responsibility. The weight of heaven's will. He believes himself chosen, and that belief will justify everything to come. His eyes turn outward, toward the lands beyond the steppe. China's golden cities to the east, and the silk-filled markets of Central Asia to the west. The horizon no longer seems distant enough. At home, he rewards those who helped him rise. Jelmjib, Sabatai. Names that will one day terrify the world, become his generals. Bert, his wife and confidant, sits beside him in council. His sons are given command of tribes, but not absolute authority. Even they must obey the yasa. If my sons fail to serve the law, he warns, let them be punished like any other man. Religion, too, finds its balance under his rule. The shamans still speak to the spirits, but Buddhists, Muslims, and Christians alike find protection in his empire. Genghis Khan does not care what gods a man worships, only that he obeys the law and pays tribute. Faith is tolerated. Disobedience is not. To unite his people's belief in him, Genghis invokes heaven Tengri, the eternal sky. He presents himself not as divine, but as Kusen. His enemies are not merely opponents, they are obstacles to cosmic order. To resist him, he says, is to resist heaven itself. The tribes that once defied him now feed his armies. Herds multiply, weapons are forged, bows are strung. The Mongols are no longer just riders and herders, they are an empire on horseback, restless and ready. Historians still puzzle over how one man transformed scattered nomads into the most efficient war machine in history. Some point to his genius for organization, others to his uncanny sense of human nature. But perhaps the answer lies in the simplicity of his belief that destiny favors the disciplined. When night falls after the coronation, the camp glows with fires. The drums beat softly, the horses breathe in the dark. Genghis Khan sits apart from the celebration, gazing into the vast sky that has always been his only ceiling. Somewhere beyond that black horizon lies the rest of the world, rich, divided, and unaware of the storm about to ride from the steppe. Tomorrow, his messengers will ride. Tomorrow, the neighbors of the Mongols will receive his envoys and his demands for submission. And if they refuse, they will meet the future, not as a visitor, but as an invasion. The first sound of the Mongol Empire is not a shout, nor a sword striking stone. It is the drumming of hooves, thousands of them, rising in rhythm like thunder across the earth. Out of the emptiness of the steppe, Genghis Khan builds something the world has never seen before. An army that moves faster than thought, fights with precision, and conquers without rest. To the sedentary kingdoms of Asia, this seems impossible. How could a people with no cities, no iron foundries, no permanent fortresses, defeat empires older than memory? But the secret of the Mongol war machine lies not in weapons, but in organization. The same principle that transformed tribes into a nation now transforms herders into soldiers. Every man of fight and age is registered into units Sarabante, Gagan 100, Mingan 1000, Taman 10,000. It is a structure so simple and efficient that it functions like a living organism. A single command from the Khan can ripple through the ranks like wind through grass. Orders are relayed by flags, drums, and arrows, and every rider knows his place in the pattern. The horse is the engine of this system. Each warrior keeps a string of remounts, 5, sometimes 6, allowing him to ride for days without stopping. The Mongols can cover up to 160 kilometers in a day, an unimaginable distance for the armies of the time. They sleep in the saddle, eat dried meat and fermented milk while riding, and cross deserts that others would not dare enter. To them, distance is not an obstacle. It is an ally. Their weapons are modest but deadly. The composite bow, made of horn, sinew, and wood, can pierce armor at 200 meters. Their armor is light, made from leather and silk, designed not to protect against arrows, but to avoid slowing them down. Every warrior carries a small file to sharpen his arrows, a needle and thread to mend his saddle, and a flint to light fires. They are not just soldiers, they are self-sustaining war machines. Discipline is absolute. Biasa applies as much to the army as to the rest of the empire. Looting without permission is punishable by death. Disobeying an order is unthinkable. But when a campaign succeeds, rewards are shared evenly. Genghis knows that fairness binds men more tightly than fear. He also perfects the art of communication. Relay stations, the Yam network, crisscross his lands, each stocked with fresh horses and supplies. Messages can travel from the heart of Mongolia to the farthest frontier in a matter of days. To enemies, this seems sorcery. To historians, it is logistics at its purest form. And then there is intelligence Gadai, as the Mongols call it. Genghis Khan understands that knowledge is as lethal as any weapon. Scouts ride ahead of every army, mapping terrain, counting enemy troops, noting water sources, and marking ambush sites. Spies infiltrate cities long before the armies arrive. False rumors are spread deliberately that the Mongols are 10 times their real number, or that they spare those who surrender. In battle, the Mongols are poetry in motion, not brute force, but choreography. They attack, retreat, and circle back in perfect rhythm. The feigned retreat, their favorite trick, draws enemies out of formation into fatal pursuit. At the right moment, they turn and strike with precision. Entire kingdoms fall for the same ruse again and again, unable to comprehend that chaos can be planned. Genghis also elevates strategy to an art. Before every campaign, his generals hold councils to debate routes, supplies, and contingencies. Dissent is encouraged until the Khan makes his decision. After that, obedience is total. A single arrow is easily broken. It tased him, but 10 bound together are strong. Yet for all their efficiency, the Mongol armies are not machines without spirit. They pray before battle, offering milk to the eternal sky. They believe that heaven favors those who ride boldly, and when they win, they give thanks not to cruelty, but to destiny. Fulfilled, what sets Genghis apart from other conquerors is his refusal to fight without purpose. Each campaign is designed not merely to conquer, but to control trade routes, acquire skilled artisans, and expand communication. Cities that surrender are absorbed into the network. Those that resist are erased from the map. It is not vengeance. It is administration. One little-known fact reveals his precision. Mongol engineers, often recruited from conquered lands, can dismantle and rebuild siege weapons in days. Chinese catapults, Persian mangonels, and even early gunpowder devices travel with the armies. Genghis collects knowledge like he collects territory. Systematically, historians still wonder how the Khan, a man with no formal education, understood systems that would not appear in Europe for centuries. Centralized command, rapid logistics, psychological warfare. Perhaps the answer lies in simplicity. A man who grew up surviving famine and betrayal learned to waste nothing. Not a word, not a moment, not a mistake. By now, the Mongol army is not just a force. It is a rumor, a legend, a shadow that stretches across borders. In Chinese villages, mothers hush their children with stories of horsemen who can appear from nowhere. In Persian bazaars, traders whisper that even the wind carries their arrows. Under the eternal blue sky, the Khan surveys his men, tens of thousands of riders, horses snorting in unison, banners snapping like thunder. He has turned nomads into an empire that can move as swiftly as a thought. And beyond that horizon lies the world, rich, divided, and unaware that its age of safety has already ended. By the early 1210s, the empire under the eternal sky has grown restless. The tribes of the steppe are unified, the internal wars silenced, and the Mongol army stands perfected, an instrument sharpened too keenly to sit idle. The horizon no longer looks like a boundary, it looks like an invitation. Beyond it lies the Silk Road, the lifeline of the world, where caravans carry silk, spices, gold, and rumors across thousands of miles. To Genghis Khan, it is not merely a trade route. It is the artery of civilization itself, and he intends to control it. At this time, the Great Khwarezm Empire dominates Central Asia, stretching from Persia to the Sirdar, from the Caspian to the Hindu Kush. Its cities, Samarkand, Bukhara, Urgent, gleam like jewels. Its merchants grow fat on the profits of East-West trade. Its ruler, Ala ad-Din Muhammad II, calls himself Shah of Khwarezm, and believes himself nearly the equal of any emperor on earth. When Genghis sends envoys westward, it is not with an army, but with diplomacy. His letters to the Shah are gracious, almost humble. He proposes an alliance, trade, friendship, and open routes between their empires. The tone is respectful. I am the ruler of the lands of the rising sun. You, the ruler of the setting sun. Let there be peace between us. But peace depends on perception, and perception is fragile. The Shah sees in these letters not diplomacy, but presumption. Who is this barbarian of the north, this horse king without a city, to address him as an equal? His advisors whisper that the Mongols are a temporary nuisance, a swarm of insects that will vanish once winter returns, and so begins one of history's most catastrophic miscalculations. A caravan of Mongol merchants, traveling under safe conduct, arrives at Otrar, a city near the Sir Darya. De Gouverneur, suspecting espionage or simply greed, arrests the traders, seizes their goods, and has them executed. Genghis Khan demands justice. The Shah refuses. In reply, Genghis sends 3 ambassadors, 1 Mongol, 2 Muslims, to negotiate peace. The Shah's response is an act of stunning arrogance. He kills one, shaves the other's beards, and sends them back humiliated. To most rulers, such an insult might have provoked anger. To Genghis Khan, it is sacrilege. Diplomats are sacred, even to enemies. To kill one is to declare war on heaven itself. He gathers his council. His decision is simple and final. The Mongols will bring justice to the Khwarezm. The army that rides west is unlike anything the world has seen. Around 200,000 men, cavalry, archers, engineers, siege specialists, move with precision through the deserts of Central Asia. They carry no supply wagons. They live off the land. Scouts race ahead, mapping every oasis, every ford, every city wall. The Shah's generals believe the vast desert between the steppe and Persia will protect them. They are wrong. The Mongols cross it in winter, guided by the stars, their horses crunching frozen sand. Within weeks, they appear like ghosts. Outside the walls of Otrar, the city that began it all. The siege lasts 5 months. The Mongols breach the walls, capture the governor, and execute him in the same brutal way he killed their merchants by pouring molten silver into his eyes and mouth. It is not vengeance. It is debtor. Every ruler who hears of it will know what happens to those who break faith. Then, like a flood released, the Mongol horde pours westward. Bukhara falls. Samarkand follows. Cities that once stood for centuries crumble in weeks. The Mongols' strategy is methodical. Surrender brings mercy. Resistance brings annihilation. The Khwarezmian armies, proud and disorganized, cannot match the discipline of the steppe. Meanwhile, Genghis Khan himself moves like a ghost, commanding his forces across 1,000 kilometers, as though he were standing among them. His generals, Sabatai, Chiba, Joki, fight like extensions of his will. The Mongol campaign is not chaos. It is choreography on a continental scale. And yet, amid the destruction, the Khan's purpose remains consistent. He orders that artisans, scholars, and engineers be spared. They are sent back east, where their skills will strengthen the empire. The Mongols do not simply destroy, they collect. In this way, the steppe begins to absorb the knowledge of the civilized world. One conquered city at a time. Historians still debate whether Genghis Khan sought vengeance or vision, whether the campaign against Khwarezm was an act of fury or of grand strategy. The evidence suggests both. The insult at Otrar lit the fire, but the dream of controlling the Silk Road fed it. To command the trade of Asia was to command the pulse of the world. By 1220, the Khwarezm Empire lies shattered. The Shah flees into the desert, hounded by Mongol detachments, until he dies alone on an island in the Caspian Sea, his empire reduced to ash. Genghis does not gloat. He simply moves on. The Silk Road, that ancient highway of goods and ideas, now lies open under his banner. From China to the Caspian, caravans move freely, protected, taxed, and monitored by Mongol law. The world, for the first time in centuries, becomes connected. And yet, the Khan's gaze keeps shifting. Beyond the mountains, beyond the horizon, there are still kingdoms untouched by his riders. The earth, it seems, is larger than any man's ambition, even his. But for Genghis Khan, that is merely a challenge, not a limit. In 1219, Genghis Khan's campaign against the Khwarezm Empire enters its decisive stage. The Mongol forces advance westward in multiple coordinated divisions. a form of military organization that demonstrates precise planning. Genghis commands the main army toward Bukhara and Samarkand, while his generals Jib and Subutai led separate units south and north to prevent escape or Otra, the first major city taken, is destroyed after its governor, Inalhuk, is captured. Historical sources, including Giovanni's History of the World Conqueror, state that the governor was executed for his role in the massacre of Mongol merchants. Though accounts differ on the exact method, the city is looted and burned, and its inhabitants are enslaved or dispersed. From Otrar, the Mongols marched to Bukhara, one of the most prominent cities in contemporary Persian accounts describe the Mongol arrival in 1220. The defending garrison attempts resistance, but is quickly overwhelmed. The Mongols breached the city walls using siege engines constructed from materials gathered on site, such as mangonels and battering rams, techniques learned from Chinese engineers within Genghis's forces. After the capture, Bukhara's population is forced to surrender valuables and livestock. The city's citadel resists longer but is taken after several days. Mosques and religious institutions are largely stripped of wealth. Genghis Khan orders that artisans and craftsmen be spared and sent east to serve in the Mongol administration. Skilled workers are relocated to Karakoram and other centers of Mongol power. The rest of the population faces execution, enslavement, or deportation. The next major target, Samarkand, is one of the largest fortified cities in Central Asia, with a reported garrison of more than 100,000 troops, including mercenaries and war elephants. Genghis approaches the city in spring 1220. His forces employ encirclement tactics, cutting off water supplies and communication. Many defenders, including a contingent of Turkish and Persian troops, surrender early in exchange for clemency. The Mongols take advantage of internal divisions, leading to a rapid collapse of organized defense. After the city's fall, most soldiers who resisted are executed. Civilians are enslaved, and the city's wealth, accumulated from trade along the Silk Road, is seized. Artisans, scribes, and administrators are transferred to Mongol-controlled territories. Chroniclers, such as Ibn al-Athir, describe widespread destruction, though some agricultural and irrigation systems survive and are later restored under Mongol administration. From Samarkand, Genghis dispatches detachments in multiple directions. One, under Joki, moves toward Urgent Gurganj, the Khwarezmian capital. Another, under Jib and Sabate, pursues the fleeing Shah across Persia. The pursuit continues through northern Iran and into the Caucasus, extending the Mongol campaign thousands of kilometers from its starting point. Urgench offers the strongest resistance of the entire campaign. The city's defenses and population density make siege operations difficult. The Mongols divert the Amudarya River to flood parts of the city, a deliberate engineering tactic recorded by Giovanni and Rashid al-Din. When Urgench finally falls, the destruction is extensive. Large sections of the city are burned, and survivors are killed or enslaved. Historical estimates of casualties vary widely, but all sources agree on massive By 1221, the Khwarezm Empire effectively ceases to exist as an independent state. Its territories, including Khorasan and Transoxiana, are under Mongol control. Cities such as Nishapur and Herat experienced similar devastation in the following years, often in retaliation for rebellions or the killing of Mongol envoys. Nishapur's destruction in 1221, after the death of Genghis's son-in-law Taku, is described in Persian sources as particularly severe. In contrast to the destruction of rebellious cities, others that surrender are incorporated with minimal damage. Balkh, Merv, and smaller towns that yield tribute are absorbed into Mongol governance. Taxation systems are introduced under appointed governors, often drawn from local bureaucrats. Genghis Khan's policy remains consistent. Submission leads to protection and economic continuity. Resistance results in annihilation. The campaign through Central Asia also demonstrates the Mongols' capacity for strategic adaptation. They employ siege warfare learned from Chinese engineers, cavalry maneuvers from the steppe, and intelligence-gathering networks that precede modern logistics. They controlled water, trade routes, and roads, enabling rapid redeployment of forces. By the end of 1221, Genghis Khan controls a territory extending from the borders of northern China to the Iranian plateau. His armies have destroyed major centers of Islamic scholarship and commerce, but also opened new routes for trade under Mongol supervision. The Silk Road is placed under a single authority for the first time in centuries, providing relative safety for caravans between east and west. Historians agree that the campaign against Khwarezm marks the transition of the Mongols from a regional power to a global empire. The destruction of Central Asian cities is among the most thoroughly recorded military events of the 13th century, described in both Persian and Chinese sources with consistent detail. After the collapse of the Khwarezm Empire in 1221, Genghis Khan's forces continue operations across Central and Western Asia. The remaining Khwarezmian resistance fragments into regional uprisings, pursued systematically by Mongol detachments. The principal Mongol generals during this phase, Sabbatai Jib and Joki, operate over vast distances, demonstrating the strategic mobility that distinguishes Mongol warfare. Jib and Subutai receive orders to pursue Shah Muhammad II, who escapes westward after the fall of Their pursuit extends across Madurai, Iran, the Caspian region, and into the Caucasus. Primary Persian sources, Juvani, Rashid al-Din, and later Georgian and Armenian chronicles confirm that Mongol forces crossed the Caspian Sea's eastern deserts, defeating multiple local powers en route, including the Kipchaks, Alans, and Georgian armies. The pursuit lasts more than 2 years, covering over 5,000 kilometers. Shah Mohammed dies in 1221 on an island in the Caspian Sea, likely from illness. His son, Jalal ad-Din Mingbarnu, becomes a leader of remaining resistance. Jalal ad-Din attempts to regroup forces in Afghanistan and northwestern India. The Mongols follow, moving through desert regions rarely crossed by organized armies. Their route through the Karakum and Kaisilkum deserts is recorded by contemporary chroniclers as unprecedented. The Mongols adapt by carrying leather water bags, subsisting on dried meat, and relying on horse milk practices already common on the steppe. In late 1221, Genghis Khan himself directs operations in Afghanistan, focusing on Balkh, Bamiyan, and Ghazni. Bamiyan resists. The city is destroyed after the death of one of Genghis's grandsons during the siege. The site's destruction, documented by Persian historians, is among the harshest punitive actions of the campaign. Archaeological evidence supports extensive damage to the region's urban centers. The Mongols then advance toward the Indus River. Jalal ad-Din attempts to resist them near the riverbanks at the Battle of the Indus in November 12. Forces include Turkish, Persian, and Afghan contingents. Despite initial resistance, the Mongols achieve victory. Jalal ad-Din escapes across the river into the Punjab, becoming one of the few opponents to survive direct confrontation with Genghis Khan. After the battle, Genghis does not continue into India. The terrain, monsoon climate, and lack of suitable grazing land make large-scale campaigning impractical. Instead, he recalls most of his forces northward toward Mongolia, having already achieved his primary objectives: the destruction of Khwarezmian power, the securing of Central Asian trade routes, and the acquisition of new intelligence about the Western world. Meanwhile, Sabbatai and Jib continue independent operations north of the Caucasus. They defeat combined forces of Georgians and Armenians in several engagements between 1220 and 1222. The campaign culminates in the Battle of the Kalka River in 1223, where they decisively defeat a coalition of Rus principalities and Cuman tribes, though far from Genghis Khan's main theater. This battle marks the first recorded Mongol contact with Eastern Europe. The methods used throughout these campaigns remain consistent: division of forces into multiple independently operating corps, use of intelligence networks, and strict logistical control. The Mongols employ relay riders for coordination, and written reports are sent back to the Khan. Even while separated by thousands of kilometers, communication remains intact, a feature unparalleled in other medieval armies. The military technology of this period shows further synthesis. Chinese engineers accompanying the Mongols develop portable trebuchets and siege crossbows for use in cities and fortresses. Persian and Central Asian engineers introduce river crossing and bridge building techniques. Combined, these innovations enable Mongol forces to move through environments, deserts, mountains, and rivers, previously impassable for large armies. The aftermath of the Western campaigns reshapes Eurasia. The Silk Road is reopened under unified Mongol authority. Trade between China, Central Asia, and the Middle East resumes with reduced risk of banditry. Caravanserais and postal stations are established at regular intervals. Chinese silk and ceramics appear in markets as far west as the Caspian within a decade of conquest. Domestically, Genghis Khan reorganizes conquered territories into administrative units governed by local officials under Mongol supervision. The darugachi, or overseers, collect tribute and maintain order. Religious institutions are generally spared if they refrain from political involvement. Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity coexist under the policy of religious neutrality. By the early 1220s, the Mongol Empire extends from northern China to the Caucasus, the largest contiguous dominion achieved by a single ruler to that point in history. Despite heavy destruction and initial conquests, trade and communication gradually stabilize under the protection of Mongol law. Historians classify this phase, from 1219 to 1223, as one of the most rapid and geographically extensive military expansions in recorded history. The campaign demonstrates the Mongols' ability to operate effectively across deserts, mountains, and multiple climate zones, while maintaining unity of command. The surviving records, primarily Persian, Chinese, and later Russian, consistently describe the Mongol armies as disciplined, adaptable, and governed by clear strategic objectives. The pattern of conquest followed by reorganization becomes the standard for subsequent Mongol campaigns in China, Persia, and Eastern Europe. While the Western campaigns devastate Central Asia, Genghis Khan directs parallel operations eastward against the Jin dynasty of northern China. The Mongol-Jin conflict begins in 1211 and continues intermittently for over 2 decades. The Jin Empire, ruled by the Jurchen people, controls northern China, including major cities such as Zhengdu, modern Beijing, and Kafi. Its population, urban infrastructure, and resources are vastly greater than those of the steppe. The Mongols begin with reconnaissance along the Great Wall. Genghis orders multiple incursions through mountain passes in Shaanxi and Hubei provinces. In 1211, his armies defeat Jin forces at the Battle of Yehuling, also known as the Wild Fox Ridge. Contemporary Chinese sources, such as the Jinshi History of the Jin, record that the Jin army, numbering several 100,000 according to inflated court reports, collapses after the Mongols use feigned retreats and flanking maneuvers. This victory opens the northern frontier. The Mongols proceed systematically. They bypass heavily fortified cities, focusing on isolating them by destroying smaller outposts and cutting supply routes. In 1213, Genghis divides his forces into 3 armies. One under Jebe advances along the Taihang Mountains. Another, under Kubilay's future guardian Mughal, captures key towns, and Genghis himself leads the main body southward. Over the next 2 years, they capture over 70 cities in Hubei and Shanxi. The Mongol strategy differs from earlier nomadic invasions. Instead of raiding and withdrawing, they occupy and administer conquered territories. Mughal, appointed as military governor of northern China, oversees taxation, agricultural management, and recruitment of local officials. He also integrates surrendered Chinese troops into Mongol ranks, forming mixed units that later serve in further conquests. In 1214, the Jin Emperor Xuanzong abandons Zhengdu under pressure and relocates his capital south to Kafi. The Mongols besiege Zhengdu shortly after. According to Jinshi, the siege lasts nearly a year. The defenders resort to burning the suburbs to prevent cover for the attackers. When the city finally falls in 1215, the Mongols sack it. Archaeological evidence in modern Beijing shows a layer of ash dating from this event. The population is displaced. Artisans and officials are relocated north. Following the capture of Zhengdu, Genghis Khan withdraws to Mongolia, leaving Mughal to continue operations. Mughal's administration becomes a model of Mongol governance over settled populations, combining military discipline with civilian bureaucracy. He keeps Chinese officials in local posts under Mongol oversight. Agricultural production resumes, and tax collection funds further campaigns. During this same period, The Tangut-led Western Xia dynasty in northwestern China also comes under renewed Mongol pressure. Genghis had initially campaigned against the Tanguts in 1209 to 1210, forcing them into battle. When Western Xia later fails to provide troops for the Khwarezm campaign, Genghis views it as betrayal. In 1226, he launches a punitive expedition. The Mongol forces cross the Yellow River, capture Liangzhou and Suzhou, and advance toward the capital. The campaign against Western Xia demonstrates the Mongols' experience in siege warfare. They employ Chinese and Muslim engineers to build catapults, trebuchets, and siege towers. The Tanguts resist for over a year, but repeated assaults and blockades collapsed their defenses. In 1227, during the final siege of Yinchuan, Genghis Khan himself participates in field operations. Despite age and illness, the Tangut capital is taken, the ruling family executed, and the dynasty extinguished. This marks the first complete destruction of a sedentary state by the Mongols. Throughout these eastern campaigns, the Mongols integrate Chinese technological and administrative knowledge. Gunpowder weapons, including fire lances and early bombs, are documented on both sides. Mongol adoption of such devices through captured engineers accelerates their later military dominance. By the mid-1220s, the Jin dynasty remains intact only in the south, weakened and isolated. Northern China is divided into Mongol-controlled provinces governed by appointed darogachi. The transition from raiding to ruling is evident in surviving administrative orders, including grain storage directives and census efforts. During this time, Genghis Khan's policy of religious tolerance continues. Buddhist temples and Taoist monasteries receive protection. Islamic and Christian communities within conquered regions are permitted to function under tax obligations. Records from Chinese and Persian sources confirm that Mongol policy prioritizes economic productivity and loyalty over belief. These campaigns solidify the Mongol presence in East Asia. The destruction of the Tangut state and the subjugation of most of northern China extend Mongol rule from the Pacific coast to the Caspian Sea. By the end of 1227, the Jin dynasty survives only in the southern plains, while the Mongols dominate the north. Genghis Khan dies that same year during the Tangut campaign. The causes are uncertain. Contemporary accounts differ, citing illness or injury. His death is kept secret for several months to prevent unrest among troops. The Eastern Wars marked the completion of Genghis Khan's strategic vision to bring the steppe and the agrarian empires into one system under the authority of the eternal blue sky. His empire at the time of his death is the largest contiguous dominion yet achieved, stretching over much of Eurasia. By the time of Genghis Khan's death in 1227, the Mongol Empire covers most of northern China, Central Asia, and parts of Persia. It extends from the Yellow River to the Caucasus, and from Siberia to the Hindu Kush. This area, over 9 million square kilometers, makes it the largest continuous land empire created by a single leader in recorded history. The political system established by Genghis Khan is based on loyalty to the Yasa, imperial law, and to the person of the Khan. The Yasa, though never fully codified in written form, is recorded in later Persian, Arabic, and Chinese sources as a set of decrees governing conduct, military discipline, taxation, and justice. It forbids theft, adultery, lying, and the killing of enemies. It requires obedience, merit-based promotion, and protection of trade caravans. The Yasa also establishes collective responsibility. Crimes committed by one member of a household can result in punishment for all. The empire's administrative system combines Mongol military structure with elements adopted from conquered civilizations. Each conquered region is placed under the supervision of a darogachi overseer, responsible for collecting tribute, maintaining order, and enforcing Mongol law. Local officials and bureaucrats, particularly in China, Transoxiana, and Persia, are retained to manage taxation and records. This policy allows continuity of governance, despite changes in political authority. A census system begins under Genghis Khan's rule and continues under his successors. The census data, recorded first in northern China and later in Central Asia, allows the Mongols to assess population numbers for taxation and conscription. The tax system is standardized across regions, with levies on goods, livestock, and agricultural output. Trade duties along the Silk Road are regulated and standardized. ensuring consistent revenue. The empire's communications network, the YAM, remains one of its most notable administrative innovations. Relay stations are placed at regular intervals approximately every 25 to 40 kilometers, each supplied with horses, provisions, and messengers. These stations enable rapid transmission of military and administrative information across thousands of kilometers. According to Giovanni, a message can travel from Karakoram to Bukhara in less than 2 weeks, a speed unmatched elsewhere in the 13th century. Economically, the Mongol Empire facilitates the reopening of long-distance trade routes. Under Genghis Khan's protection, merchants from China, Persia, and the Islamic world travel with official passus, guaranteeing safe conduct. This stability allows goods such as silk, paper, ceramics, glassware, and precious metals to circulate widely. The flow of information also increases. Technologies such as papermaking, printing, and gunpowder move westward through Mongol territory. Diplomacy becomes institutionalized. Genghis Khan maintains correspondences and emissaries to foreign powers, including the Khitan in Manchuria, the Korean Goryeo dynasty, and the Abbasid Caliphate. In Baghdad, his envoys also reach the Caucasus and Eastern Europe. These missions often precede military expansion, but also carry commercial and political aims. Religious policy remains one of pragmatic tolerance. Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, and shamanic communities coexist under Mongol rule. Genghis Khan exempts religious leaders from taxation and conscription. Islamic sources, such as those by Ibn al-Athir and Chinese Buddhist records, confirm that temples, mosques, and churches are permitted to operate freely as long as they avoid political activity. Socially, the empire remains divided between nomadic and sedentary populations. Mongols and other steppe peoples continue to form the military elite, while local administrators and artisans sustain economic life. Intermarriage between Mongol nobles and the daughters of local rulers is encouraged to stabilize alliances. At the center of the empire lies the concept of the eternal blue sky Tengri, the spiritual and ideological foundation of Genghis Khan's authority. The Khan is regarded as the chosen representative of heaven, ruling by divine mandate. Rituals, sacrifices, and state ceremonies reinforce this belief. The Great Kurultai Assembly serves as the central political institution, gathering Mongol leaders to elect or confirm the supreme ruler and to decide major campaigns. In Karakorum, which later becomes the Mongol capital, construction begins on permanent structures, palaces, administrative quarters, and temples. Archaeological findings show early development of urban planning, with irrigation channels and artisan workshops. Although Genghis Khan himself continues to live primarily in mobile encampments, these foundations mark the transition from a purely nomadic to a semi-settled imperial administration. In legal and administrative affairs, Genghis Khan promotes individuals based on ability. Non-Mongols, including Uyghur scribes and Chinese administrators, serve in key bureaucratic positions. The Uyghur script is adopted as the empire's written language for official correspondence. This adoption facilitates record-keeping across multiple ethnic and linguistic groups. Military service remains the cornerstone of the empire. Every able-bodied male between 15 and 70 owes service to the Khan. Commanders are selected based on skill and loyalty rather than heritage. The Mongol army's structured decimal organization, strict discipline, and strategic coordination continues to function across continents. By maintaining open trade routes, ensuring communication, and establishing uniform governance, the empire achieves an unprecedented degree of internal stability. The period following Genghis Khan's conquests witnesses the beginning of what historians later call the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol Peace. Though characterized by initial destruction, it results in a century of relative safety for merchants and travelers across Eurasia. When Genghis Khan dies in 1227, his burial location remains unknown. Sources differ. Rashid Olden claims it was near the Anan River in Mongolia. Chinese records refer to the Khenti Mountains. No confirmed archaeological evidence has been found. His death is concealed until the Tangut campaign concludes, ensuring continuity of command. At the moment of his death, Succession passes according to custom to his sons and immediate family. As decided earlier in council, the empire remains intact. A unified political entity organized by laws, communication, and a shared ideology under the eternal sky. Religious policy under Genghis Khan and his immediate successors is defined by official neutrality and protection of multiple faiths within the empire. Surviving decrees and later chronicles, including Rashid al-Din's Hatam Yalturk and the Yuanshi history of the Yuan, record that Genghis Khan exempts religious leaders and institutions from taxation, corvée labor, and military service. This principle continues throughout Mongol governance. The empire includes adherents of Tengriism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, particularly Taoism, and various shamanic traditions. Genghis Khan himself continues the worship of Tengri, the eternal blue sky and ancestral spirits. Rituals of divination, sacrifice, and purification accompany major decisions such as campaigns or council assemblies. However, he avoids imposing these practices on conquered peoples. The Mongol leadership views religion primarily as a social and administrative factor rather than as a matter of personal salvation. Faiths that support stability are encouraged. Those that foster political resistance are restricted. Buddhist monks and Taoist adepts serve as advisors, while Muslim scholars act as translators, astronomers, and accountants. Nestorian Christians, particularly from Central Asia, occupy roles as diplomats and scribes. One of the earliest examples of Mongol religious diplomacy occurs during the Jin campaigns 1211 to 1215. Buddhist temples in conquered territories are protected in exchange for prayers for the Khan's success. Chinese monastic records from the Fiyuan Zhulin and related texts confirm tax exemptions granted to monasteries that cooperate with Mongol authorities. In the Western domains, Islamic institutions receive similar treatment. Mosques destroyed during the Khwarezmian Wars are rebuilt under later Mongol administration. Documents from Bukhara and Samarkand show that Muslim qadis, judges, and imams continue to operate courts under Mongol oversight. Genghis Khan issues decrees guaranteeing freedom of worship as long as local leaders maintain order and pay tribute. The Mongols' approach to religion also serves diplomatic and intelligence purposes. Religious figures act as envoys between regions. Buddhist monks carry messages between Karakoram and Tibetan monasteries. Muslim scholars establish contacts with the Caliphate and Indian Sultan. Christian emissaries travel between the Mongols and European courts. These interactions create one of the earliest transcontinental information networks in recorded history. Although tolerant, the Mongols enforce clear boundaries between religion and governance. No clergy is allowed to hold administrative or military authority independent of the Khan. Tax collection, census duties, and legal judgment remain secular functions. Violations of the yasa are punishable regardless of religious status. This distinction ensures that faith remains subordinate to political control. Under Genghis Khan, the empire begins to incorporate a scientific and literary culture derived from multiple traditions. Astronomers from Persia and China collaborate in calculating calendars and mapping routes. Medical practitioners from the Islamic world introduce treatments later integrated into Mongol military medicine. Translators render religious and philosophical texts into Mongolian and Uyghur scripts. The exchange of knowledge is facilitated by the empire's communications network and by the safety of travel under Mongol protection. Archaeological and textual evidence indicates that the Mongols construct multi-religious centers in their camps and early cities. In Karakoram, established as a central headquarters during Gaday's reign, temples, mosques, and churches coexist within a walled area. Excavations reveal remains of Buddhist stupas and Islamic prayer niches. Dating from the 13th century, Genghis Khan's policies on tolerance derive partly from practical governance. The empire encompasses tens of millions of subjects across cultures and languages. Attempting to impose a single faith would have risked rebellion. By protecting all religions equally, the Khan secures loyalty from diverse populations and ensures economic productivity. The empire's religious inclusiveness also encourages intercultural scholarship. During the early 13th century, Buddhist texts from Tibet reached Central Asia. Persian translations of Greek medical works spread eastward, and Islamic cartographers collaborate with Chinese geographers. This exchange lays groundwork for later advances under the Yuan dynasty. Nevertheless, tolerance has limits. Religious groups that challenge Mongol authority face suppression. Records from Central Asia mention punitive measures against sects involved in tax evasion or local uprisings. In China, certain Taoist factions lose privileges for refusing military requisitions. The Mongols' tolerance functions within a framework of absolute political obedience. Genghis Khan's successors institutionalize this balance. After his death, his son Gedai confirms religious exemptions by decree and expands patronage of clerics who support the regime. In 1246, papal envoy Giovanni da Pian del Carpini observes in Karakoram that Buddhist, Muslim, and Christian representatives conduct ceremonies simultaneously without conflict under the oversight of Mongol officials. His report, Historia Mongolorum, becomes one of the earliest European accounts of religious coexistence. In Asia, the Mongol understanding of divine mandate remains centered on the Khan is believed to rule by heaven's favor, and victories are interpreted as proof of that favor. This belief allows the coexistence of multiple faiths under a single cosmological framework. All religions are viewed as paths acknowledging the supremacy of heaven and the authority of the Khan. In practice, this worldview provides the ideological stability needed to govern a multinational empire. It reinforces obedience while permitting cultural diversity. The system functions effectively for decades, enabling administration, commerce, and scholarship to continue across regions that had previously been divided by religious boundaries. By the end of Genghis Khan's lifetime, the empire is not only a military power, but also a conduit of cross-cultural exchange. Its policy of religious tolerance, combined with strict administrative control, becomes one of its defining characteristics and a key factor in its longevity. In 1226, Genghis Khan launches his final military expedition against the Tenggid-led Western Xia dynasty in northwestern China. The campaign is motivated by the Tanguts' refusal to support Mongol operations against the Khwarezm Empire. Despite the earlier submission in 1209, historical sources, including the Yuan Shi History of the Yuan, Juvayni, and Rashid al-Din, confirm that Genghis considers this refusal a violation of vassal obligations. The Western Xia, known in Chinese as Xixia, occupy the region between the Yellow River and the Helan Mountains, with their capital at Yinchuan modern Ningxi. Their population includes Tanguts, Chinese, Tibetans, and Uyghurs. The state is prosperous and fortified, benefiting from irrigation networks along the Yellow River. It controls key routes between the steppe and the Chinese interior, making it strategically valuable. In spring 1226, the Mongols begin operations by advancing through the Hexi corridor. Genghis divides his army into multiple columns, a standard Mongol practice. One detachment under his general Sebati secures the northern frontier to prevent reinforcements. Another, under Tului, Genghis's youngest son, captures key towns, including Lianzhou, Ganzhou, and Su. Archaeological layers in these cities show widespread destruction. Dating from this period, Mongol tactics combined rapid movement and siege technology. Engineers, many of them Chinese and Muslim, construct trebuchets, siege towers, and battering rams. The Western Xia armies attempt to resist using city walls and fortified river crossings, but suffer from inferior mobility and internal disunity. By late 1226, the Mongols capture most of the territory west of the Yellow River. Primary accounts indicate that Genghis Khan personally leads the main force across the river during autumn. His army surrounds the Tanguid capital, Yinchuan. The Mongols cut off water supplies by diverting canals, a method also used in earlier sieges, such as Adurj. The Tengut forces, unable to secure relief from the Jin dynasty or other allies, are isolated. In the winter of 1226 to 1227, Genghis continues operations despite advanced age, approximately mid-60s, and reported illness or injury. Chinese sources suggest he suffers a fall from a horse during the campaign. Other accounts mention fever or infection, but none provide conclusive detail. Regardless, he remains in command until the end of hostilities. The final assault on Yinchuan occurs in early 1227. The city surrenders after a prolonged siege. The Tangut ruler, Emperor Moshu, submits to Genghis Khan. According to Rashid Olden, Genghis orders the execution of the Tangut royal family and destruction of the capital, effectively ending the Western Xia state. Modern archaeological studies of the Yinchuan region confirm large-scale burned layers consistent with the city's obliteration. Following the victory, Genghis Khan's health deteriorates rapidly. He dies later that year, most likely in August 1227. The location of his death is described differently across sources. Rashid Alden places it near the Liupain Mountains. Chinese chronicles suggest the vicinity of Yin. The exact circumstances remain uncertain. The Mongol leadership conceals his death until the campaign concludes to prevent disorder among troops. His body is transported secretly back toward Mongolia. According to tradition recorded by Persian and Mongol historians, the funeral procession passes through the Ordos and Gobi regions. Those who encounter it are said to have been executed to preserve secrecy. A common legend but not corroborated by archaeological evidence. The burial site, often identified with the Khenti Mountains near the Annan River, has never been discovered despite multiple expeditions. Before his death, Genghis finalizes the succession plan decided at an earlier. His third son, Gadai, is designated as the Great Khan, chosen for his administrative ability and moderation. Joki, the eldest, dies before his father. Chagatai and Tolui retain significant authority as regional rulers. The empire is thus divided administratively among his sons while remaining politically unified. Under the Great Khan, Genghis leaves instructions concerning governance, taxation, and the treatment of subject peoples. His decrees emphasize merit-based promotion, justice, and continuation of the Yam postal system. Chroniclers record his final injunctions to preserve unity among his descendants and loyalty to the eternal sky. At the time of his death, the Mongol Empire includes most of Central Asia, northern China, and the Eastern Islamic world. Its population encompasses diverse ethnicities: Mongols, Turks, Persians, Chinese, Koreans, and others, linked through trade routes and a unified legal order. The consequences of the Tangut campaign are the Western Xia civilization disappears entirely as a political entity. Its written language, once widely used, falls into obscurity. Excavations of Tangut manuscripts at Karakoto in the early 20th century reveal fragments of this lost culture, confirming reports of its destruction by the Mongols. Following Genghis Khan's death, the Mongol command structure remains intact. Tolui leads the army home, ensuring secure transition of authority. The Great Khan, as death does not cause immediate fragmentation, a sign of the discipline and institutional framework he established. Historians consider the 1226 to 1227 campaign significant for two reasons. It demonstrates Genghis Khan's sustained strategic control until his final days, and it marks the completion of Mongol dominance over all neighboring powers of Inner Asia, with the Tangut, Jin, and Khwarezm states eliminated or subdued. The steppe is politically unified for the first time in recorded history. After Genghis Khan's death in 1227, the Mongol leadership follows established succession protocols. His third son, Gadai Khan, is confirmed as Great Khan in 1229 during a Kurultai assembly held on the Korolen River in Mongolia. The succession is peaceful, following Genghis's earlier designation, and the empire remains united under his laws and administrative framework. Gadai inherits a functioning system of command, communication, and taxation. The empire's territory includes northern China under partial control, all of Central Asia, Transaxiana, and much of Persia. The next phase focuses on consolidating these conquests and expanding westward. Gadai appoints experienced generals and administrators to maintain stability. Kormakan oversees Persia. Sabatai commands western campaigns. Yelu Chukai, a Confucian scholar, becomes a principal advisor in China. Between 1229 and 1234, the Mongols complete the conquest of the Jin dynasty in northern China. Operations resume under Gadai's command, led by Tolui initially, and after his death, by some. The Mongols employ siege tactics developed earlier, combining Chinese engineering with steppe mobility. Kafun, the Jin capital, falls in 1233 after a prolonged siege. The last Jin emperor dies in 1234, ending over a century of Jurchen rule. Northern China becomes a Mongol administrative zone governed by appointed daruga. In the west, Kormakan re-establishes control over Persia and the Caucasus, The Mongol military reorganizes the conquered territories into four main commands: Transaxiana, Khorasan, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. Local rulers who submit are allowed to remain as vassals under tribute. These arrangements stabilize the region and open it to renewed trade along the Silk Road. From 1236 to 1242, the Mongols expand into Eastern Europe under the command of Batush Khan, son of Joki and Their campaigns, collectively known as the Western Ores invasion, follow systematic reconnaissance and advanced planning. The Mongols defeat the Valga Bulgars, destroy the Cuman Confederation, and subdue the principalities of Kiev and Rus. Major engagements include the Battle of the Kelka River 1223, the destruction of Ryazan 1237, and the capture of Kiev 1240. Archaeological excavations confirm widespread burn layers in these cities corresponding to these dates. After consolidating the Rus territories, the Mongols cross into Central Europe. They defeat Hungarian forces at the Battle of Mohi, 1241, and Polish forces at Legnica. The campaigns end abruptly in 1242 following Geday's death, when Batu withdraws to attend the Kurotai for succession. Despite the withdrawal, Eastern Europe remains under Mongol influence for centuries through the Golden Horde, the successor state established by Bata in the lower Volga region. In China, Geday continues efforts to administer conquered lands efficiently. He orders a census of all households, standardizes taxes, and enforces protection of trade routes. The Yam postal system is expanded to connect Karakoram with Central Asia and northern China. Ye Luchukai implements fiscal reforms, reducing unnecessary slaughter and depopulation by substituting regular taxation for plunder. His policies lay the groundwork for stable governance under later Mongol rulers. During this period, Karakoram develops into a permanent capital. Archaeological evidence shows the construction of administrative buildings, workshops, and places of worship representing multiple faiths. Buddhist temples, Muslim mosques, and Christian churches, consistent with the empire's policy of tolerance. Roads and relay stations extend in all directions, reinforcing the communication network that supports both governance and military operations. Culturally, the empire becomes increasingly cosmopolitan. Uyghur, Persian, and Chinese languages serve as administrative mediums. The Uyghur script remains official for Mongolian writing. Diplomats and merchants from distant regions, Europe, India, and the Middle East, travel safely under Mongol-issued passes. The stability across Eurasia facilitates the movement of ideas, technologies, and people. The death of Geday in 1241 marks the beginning of internal division within the imperial family. His widow Trejin Katonak as regent, until their son, Kayak, is elected Great Khan in 1246. The Mongols continue campaigns in the Middle East and Europe, though internal rivalries increase among the descendants of Genghis Khan's sons. Joki, Tolui's lineage, gains prominence. His son, Manangi Khan, elected in 1251, restores unity briefly and renews large-scale conquests. Under Mangi, the Mongols launch simultaneous campaigns in China and the Middle East. His brother Kublai leads the invasion of southern China against the Song dynasty, while another brother, Hulagu, leads the army into Persia and Mesopotamia. Hulag's forces capture Baghdad in 1258, ending the Abbasid Caliphate, and establish the Ilkhanate in Persia. After Mangik's death in 1259, a succession conflict arises between Kublai and Arik Bakay, leading to civil war. 1262, Kublai emerges victorious and declares himself Great Khan. He relocates the imperial capital to Beijing and establishes the Yuan dynasty in 1271, marking the formal integration of China into the Mongol world empire. By the late 13th century, the empire has divided into four main Khanates: the Yuan dynasty in China, ruled by Kublai Khan, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Golden Horde in the Western Steppe in Eastern Europe. Each Khanate recognizes the symbolic authority of the Great Khan, but functions independently. Despite political fragmentation, trade and communication continue across borders. Upheld by Mongol administrative practices and the Pax Mongolica, that persists through the 14th century. The empire's structure after Genghis Khan thus reflects both continuity and adaptation. His laws, military organization, and administrative concepts remain intact, but the scale of the empire makes central control impossible. The division into khanates marks the transition from a single unified empire to a network of successor states, bound by shared heritage, law, and culture. Historians assess the period following Genghis Khan's death as one of institutional consolidation and global interaction. Under his descendants, Mongol rule connects East Asia, the Islamic world, and Europe in a continuous zone of exchange, unprecedented in pre-modern history. By the mid-14th century, the Mongol Empire no longer exists as a single political unit, but its influence remains visible across Eurasia. The four successor khanates, Yuan China, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, and the Golden Horde in Eastern Europe, continue to operate under administrative systems, military organization, and legal traditions established by Genghis Khan. The Yuan dynasty in China, founded officially in 1271 by Kublai Khan, represents the most advanced transformation of Mongol rule into a settled imperial structure. Its capital at Dadu, modern Beijing, becomes one of the largest cities in the world. Administrative divisions follow earlier Chinese models, but Mongol law and hierarchy remain dominant. Chinese scholars, Persian administrators, and Central Asian officials serve under a unified bureaucracy. The Yuanji records extensive census data, standardized taxation, and public works projects such as the expansion of the Grand Canal. Paper currency, introduced under Kublai, circulates throughout the empire. The Yuan dynasty endures until 1368, when the Ming dynasty seizes control. In Central Asia, the Chagatai Khanate, named after Genghis Khan's second son, governs the region from the Amu Darya to the Tarim Basin. Although initially cohesive, it fragments into western and eastern halves by the 14th century. Despite internal conflicts, the Khanate preserves the Mongol legal code Yasa and facilitates the continued use of the Silk Road. The Turkic and Mongolian populations gradually merge, producing new linguistic and cultural identities. The Ilkhanate in Persia, founded by Hulagu Khan in 1256, governs a territory stretching from the Caucasus to Afghanistan. Its rulers, including Ghazan Khan, are 1295 to 1304, adopt Islam and introduce administrative and fiscal reforms combining Mongol, Persian, and Islamic elements. The Ilkhanate's capital at Tabriz becomes a major center of trade and scholarship. Persian historiography flourishes under Mongol patronage. Rashid al-Din Eshota Mir Al-Tort Compendium of Chronicles provides one of the most comprehensive world histories of the medieval period, recording Mongol conquests alongside global events. In the northwest, the Golden Horde, ruled by Batu Khan and his descendants, dominates the steppe regions of modern Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan. Its capital at Sarai, near the Volga River, serves as a major hub for trade between east and west. The Horde imposes tribute on the principalities of Rus, but allows local rulers to govern autonomously. The Mongol influence introduces administrative reforms, census taking, and postal systems that persist in the region for centuries. The Horde's conversion to Islam in the early 14th century under Zizbeg Khan marks a significant cultural shift across all regions. The Mongol system of communication, the M network, continues to facilitate long-distance exchange. Merchants, envoys, and scholars travel across territories with official passes. Ensuring protection, the safety of these routes encourages unprecedented intercontinental trade. Goods such as silk, spices, ceramics, glassware, and textiles move freely between China, the Middle East, and Europe. The historian William of Rubruck and the merchant Marco Polo both travel through Mongol lands, describing cosmopolitan societies governed by consistent law and efficient infrastructure. Technological and intellectual transmission accelerates under Mongol rule. Gunpowder, papermaking, and printing techniques spread from China to the Islamic world and Europe. Persian astronomy and medicine reach East Asia, while Chinese mathematics and engineering influence the West. The Mongols do not originate these innovations, but their empire provides the stable environment through which they circulate. In governance, Genghis Khan's emphasis on merit and discipline remains visible in successor states. Military command structures, based on the decimal system of tens, hundreds, thousands, and tens of thousands, persist across the Khan. Promotion by ability, rather than lineage, continues as a principle in both military and civil service. The administrative model he created becomes a template for empires that follow, including the Ming, Timurid, and Mughal states. Demographically, the conquests cause large-scale destruction and depopulation in initial phases, particularly in Central Asia, northern China, and the Middle East. However, once stability is achieved, trade and agriculture recover. The Mongols encouraged resettlement by transferring skilled artisans and farmers across regions. Over time, this movement of populations contributes to cultural fusion and economic recovery. Religious tolerance remains a defining legacy. Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, and shamanic communities coexist across Mongol territories. The empire's pragmatic approach to faith influences later rulers, including Timur Tamerlane and the Mughal emperors, who adopt similar policies to govern diverse populations. The environmental and epidemiological effects of Mongol expansion are also significant. The integration of Eurasia facilitates not only trade but also the movement of diseases. The Black Death, which spreads from Asia to Europe in the mid-14th century, travels along the same trade routes maintained under Mongol control. While devastating, this event highlights the degree of interconnection the empire created. Genetic and historical studies indicate that Genghis Khan's lineage leaves a lasting demographic impact. A 2003 genetic survey, published in the American Journal of Human Genetics, identifies a white chromosome lineage present in approximately 8% of men across a vast region of Eurasia, likely originating from the Mongol imperial clan. This distribution illustrates the dynasty's extensive progeny and integration with local populations. By the time the last Mongol states decline in the 15th century, the political unity of the empire is gone, but its structural and cultural effects persist. The Silk Road remains open for another century. Mongol administrative terminology enters Persian, Russian, and Chinese languages, and the memory of the Khan endures in folklore from the Pacific to the Black Sea. Modern historians assess Genghis Khan's legacy through multiple lenses. He is viewed as both a destroyer and a unifier, responsible for massive loss of life, yet also for creating the first truly global system of exchange. His military reforms influenced warfare for centuries, and his administrative principles formed the basis for centralized rule across Eurasia. The empire's long-term influence lies not in monuments or cities, but in systems communication, law, and commerce that continue long after its fall. By uniting the steppe and the settled world, Genghis Khan and his successors alter the course of world history. By the end of the 14th century, the Mongol Empire has dissolved as a political entity, yet its structures, ideas, and legacies remain embedded across Eurasia. The administrative practices begun by Genghis Khan centralized communication, standardized taxation, religious neutrality, and the rule of Lorishevev region the Mongols touch. The concept of governance by merit rather than ancestry influences later imperial systems from China, Ming administration to the bureaucracies of Russia and the Islamic world. Trade along the Silk Road flourishes for more than a century after his death. The Pax Mongolica, or Mongol Peace, allows merchants, envoys, and scholars to move from the Mediterranean to the Pacific under predictable protection. Paper money circulates from China to Persia. Spices, glassware, and textiles cross borders without interruption. Knowledge spreads. Persian astronomy reaches Beijing. Chinese printing appears in Samarkand, and gunpowder weaponry moves toward Europe. The Mongol system of communication relay posts, mounted couriers, and documented travel permits creates the first consistent transcontinental network. Modern postal and administrative systems trace conceptual origins to these institutions. The empire's infrastructure also enables one of history's earliest global information exchanges, connecting previously isolated cultures into a single economic and intellectual sphere. In population and language, The Mongol era leaves permanent marks. Turkic and Mongol dialects mix across Central Asia, forming new linguistic and ethnic identities. Mongol legal and administrative terms enter Persian, Russian, and Chinese vocabularies. Cities rebuilt after the conquests. Bukhara, Samarkand, Beijing grow into cosmopolitan centers, where Persian scholars, Arab traders, and Chinese officials coexist under the same laws. The costs of this transformation are immense. Contemporary sources and modern estimates suggest tens of millions perished during Mongol campaigns. Entire regions, particularly in Central Asia and the Middle East, experienced depopulation and agricultural collapse before later recovery. Yet, following stabilization, these same lands become some of the safest and most interconnected in history. The paradox defines Genghis Khan's legacy. He destroys in order to reorder, dismantles kingdoms to create a system broader than any before. Religious and cultural pluralism endure as another outcome. The Mongols' pragmatic tolerance protecting temples, mosques, and churches alike sets a precedent for later empires facing diversity. Their policy that belief is free, loyalty is required remains one of the most effective formulas for ruling heterogeneous populations. The environmental and epidemiological effects are complex. The reopening of trade routes links ecosystems across continents, transmitting crops, animals, and diseases. The spread of the Black Death through the 14th century, carried by trade caravans from Mongolia to Europe, reveals how fully the world has become connected through the systems Genghis established. Centuries after his death, Genghis Khan's reputation differs by region. In Mongolia, he is revered as the father of the nation, a symbol of unity and independence. In China, he is recorded as a founder of the Yuan dynasty. In Central Asia and the Middle East, his name remains associated with both devastation and order. Western historiography of the 19th and 20th centuries, influenced by new access to Persian and Chinese records, begins to view him not only as a conqueror, but as a state builder who integrated Eurasia. Modern research supports this dual image. Genetic, linguistic, and archaeological evidence demonstrates how the Mongol conquests accelerated global exchange. The systems introduced by Genghis Khan, standardized laws, meritocratic promotion, census administration, and postal communication persist in successor states for centuries. They represent a fundamental reorganization of human connectivity rather than a transient military achievement. Historians continue to debate Genghis Khan's ultimate intent, whether his conquests aimed at global dominion, commercial control, or divine mandate. The records he left provide no ideological manifesto beyond loyalty to the eternal sky and the pursuit of order. What is certain is that his actions created the first world system, a single, if temporary, network of governance, economy, and culture spanning the entire breadth of Eurasia. The Mongol Empire demonstrates how the steppe, long dismissed as peripheral, becomes the center of world transformation. Genghis Khan's legacy lies not only in the vast territories he conquered, but in the durable systems he imposed upon them. Through discipline, organization, and adaptation, a nomadic society reshapes global civilization. 8 centuries later, his influence remains measurable. In the roots of trade and migration, in administrative vocabulary, in patterns of empire building, and in the idea that governance can unite cultures rather than destroy them. Under the same endless blue sky that once guided his riders, the echoes of his empire still cross continents.